Hey there, Dr. Nick Galli, mental performance consultant for US Speed Skating, here again with you today. And I'd like to talk to you about something that's a very simple, but I think a very powerful tool for focus and ultimately for performance. And that's something that I call the personal success checklist. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it is and why you might want to use one and what it can do for you. So the first question that I like to ask when I go into this personal success checklist is just to generate some self-reflection around what does success mean to you? And a lot of times I ask this question, and it's the typical things. Sometimes it's just making the team, or making the starting rotation or the traveling team. Um, Sometimes for young athletes in high school, it's getting a scholarship. Other times it's qualifying for a big event, a World Cup, for example, in speed skating. Sometimes there's statistical milestones that an athlete wants to achieve, either just for the sake of achieving the statistic itself, or that milestone, or for the purpose of getting that scholarship, making the team, qualifying for that event. And then, of course, the big one, of course, is beating others and winning. And that's what sport's all about. And it's great. And you have to have that goal at some point. But what I found in working with a lot of clients is that sometimes this goal gets in the way of allowing the performer to really perform in a loose and fluid way and to the best of their ability. So we have this conversation around, hey, what are you striving for out there? Where's your head? And if it's on things like this, what we see on the screen right here, the funny thing about it is that while you're playing, that actually becomes a distraction. And we call those things on that other screen an outcome focus. Those are all outcomes that we really want to see and that we strive for. But if they are at the forefront of our mind while we're performing, they become a distraction, and they lead to this thing called trying too hard that you may be familiar with as a performer or as a coach or as a parent of an athlete. When we're out there, as much as possible, and I like this graphic here on the left, we want our athletes to be mindful, meaning in the present and at one with their movement, rather than have their mind full with lots of other extraneous things that they really can't control. We see it a lot of time in sports like baseball and golf. The athlete who over tries leads to sort of funny looking swings, weird outcomes, movement that's just not coordinated. And this is what can happen when you allow those outcomes to overtake you. And a lot of times this happens when the athlete's in a slump, especially. So a lesson that I like to teach that relates to this idea of the personal success checklist is, and I draw this with almost all of my athletes, is the circle of control versus the circle of the things that you can't control. So you can see here we have concentric circles. In the middle, we have a smaller circle of things that we actually can control, which is actually a very small list when you really think about it. And then the outer circle here, we have the circle of things that we can't control. And that's a really long list. And so I'll sit down with athletes and we'll fill in those bubbles. And like I say, it's a long list in that outer circle and a pretty short list in the inner circle. And then we'll take stock of when you're actually out there performing. If we were to put a percent of time on each circle, how much time do you think you're spending focusing on the things that you can't control versus the things that you can control? And when things aren't going well, usually the percentage is much more weighted toward the things that they can't control. And this makes sense to them. But the next question is, so how do I do it? How do I stop focusing on the things that I can't control and start focusing on the things that I can control? And that's why I started using this personal success checklist. So here's an example of one that I just made it up. It's very generic. You can see that all of those thoughts and behaviors on the left are examples of things that are completely in the athlete's control. Getting adequate nutrition and rest, using the pre-race routine that works for them, both mental and physical, having a race plan, doing what they need to do after the race to recover. Did I do these things? Yes, then I can either use a check mark or an X for anything that I did do, and maybe a 0 for the things that I didn't do. And the athlete can kind of come up with some parameters like, okay, so if I've got 4 things on this list, and I can honestly say that I did 3 out of 4 of them, I had a pretty good day, separate from what the scoreboard says, or what the rankings say at the end of the event. Or they can say, no, I need to go 4 for 4. But that's up to the athlete, and this is a very empowering thing, as I'll talk about here in a minute. So here's what this process might look like for an athlete. Decide on the things that you want on that list, and maybe you work with the coach to do that. You create the list, you practice it, and that's really important. Use it in practice, refine it, take a look at it before you go compete, and then most importantly, look at it at the end of the day. And it won't always align with those traditional definitions of success, and that's okay. That's the point. I think if you consistently commit to using a checklist or something like this, you will be empowered. You will be empowered to take ownership over your own success, much like you did maybe when you first started playing sport, and it was all just about just moving around and learning new things. And at the same time, while you do that, the great thing about this is it's going to push you closer to those more traditional definitions of success: the winning, the qualifying, the scholarships, all of that good stuff. And it's a win-win. So I think it's a simple thing to do, and something that you might try that could really get your head into the right place when you're out there. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for listening.